What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. If you're new here, I'm Max Torres. I'm the host of this podcast, and I'm the publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks for Sports Illustrated over on Fan Nation. And today I am joined by Ducks Digest reporter Graham Metzker. We're going to be continuing our spring football positional preview. Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to take a chance to shout out the last episode that we did. I was joined by former Oregon Director of Recruiting Strategy, Sam Popper, who's now at Akron with Joe Moorhead. And that was just a super cool episode, all kinds of unique insight into, the science, as I'm calling it, of recruiting. So that's on my YouTube channel at Oregon Football Max Torres. You guys can head over there. Give me shoot me a subscribe over there and follow us on Twitter and all that good stuff. But now we're just a couple days away, Graham, from spring football. Gonna talk some cornerbacks. You had a written piece that was on Ducks Digest. Definitely want people to go check that out if they haven't already. First of all, how you doing and how excited are you for spring football?
Max, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing good. I'm super excited. How can it not be good? Finals coming close. We're about to get some spring football. We need it. We need some good football action definitely coming soon.
Yeah, with basketball, I don't want to say it's winding down because it's March, but the men's team might not even make March Madness, and we'll see what the women can do in March Madness. They're looking a lot more secure there, but I say all that to say that people really love football in Eugene, so it feels like we'll take anything that we can get here. So we're talking corners today, Graham. I think it's without a doubt one of the youngest groups on this Oregon roster. So, we kind of have a little bit of a plan of, what we want to talk about here, but just kind of looking big picture, how are you feeling about this group just off the top?
Just off the top, I think this group has a lot to prove. Like you said, a lot of freshmen, whether redshirt, use that COVID year, very, very young cornerback room here. And coming in, we're going to talk about it in a little bit, but we got some really high-profile recruits coming in to the secondary in the coming years to Eugene. So it's going to be the job of these cornerbacks to really set the tone, I feel like, for University of Oregon secondary. We've had a lot of good players come out recently, but this year is definitely a question, and we're looking for someone to step up, or the Ducks are looking for someone to step up, definitely there.
Yeah, Ducks losing a couple pretty significant guys since the end of last season. And they're also going to be led by a new coach with Dan Lanning taking over as the new head coach. He wanted to put new guys in place to lead his team. So you got Demetrius Martin coming over from Colorado. That was his last stop, and he'll be coaching the corners here. How do you feel about that Demetrius Martin hire? Because he's a guy that I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, you know what, Max? You were talking a little bit about the science of recruiting. I think Dan Lanning has shown he's got a PhD in that. Just in his first couple months in Eugene. I mean, Demetrius Martin, ever since he came in, I feel like he at least started work at shoring up the cornerbacks. Mikhail Wright headed to the draft. DJ James, Jalen Davies hitting the transfer portal. We started to see those losses made up for once he came in.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, go for it, man. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, yeah, just very excited. Definitely. I mean, it's been only positives since Martin came in so far.
If I'm Martin, I'm looking at this Oregon roster and trying to figure out how it can fill those holes, the void for those guys that left, those departures. Wright was the number one corner at Oregon. He talked about at the Combine how Mario Cristobal's departure was a big factor for why he decided to end up declaring for the draft. I personally think he could have benefited from another year just because he was a little bit up and down, I think, during his time at Oregon from a production standpoint. But he's definitely got a lot of big tools to his game that I think are going to transition well to the next level. For Demetrius Martin, he has been a very good recruiter for the Ducks even since being here. And what really excites me about Demetrius Martin is this is the biggest brand, as far as I know, that he's worked with during his coaching career, at least in the Pac-12. This guy has coached at about half the schools in the Pac-12. And I think if you look at his body of work, his coaching philosophy, his work as a recruiter, his roots in the LA area, and then you combine all of that with this Oregon brand, I feel like we're going to see some pretty big things as far as the talent that he can attract. And then not only that, what he can do with those recruits once they get to Eugene and are ultimately, suiting up for the Ducks on Saturday.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that Martin has never had access to the high-level recruits that Oregon can give him. I mean, you look down the list, you see freshmen, redshirt freshmen, but a lot of these guys that we're going to talk about were 4 stars, even 5 stars coming out of high school. So, a lot of them are they're almost new recruits. And with this new coach, it could be a new beginning, and we could see someone step up that we weren't expecting.
So we were talking about some of the losses that Oregon has had to overcome since just the end of last season. We talked about Mikhail Wright going to the NFL draft, Jalen Davies entering the transfer portal. That was pretty surprising. And then DJ James ends up back in his home state of Alabama, now at Auburn, where Jason Jones, another former Duck, is going to be playing his football in 2022. Kind of just give us a feel, Graham. How significant of a loss do you think those guys are for the Ducks as we head into spring?
It's definitely significant. I mean, I know you and we got a special place in our heart for that DJ James pick against UCLA. We were there to see that. I was looking for him to take a big step, and even if Mikhail Wright would have came back, I could have seen DJ James overtake him as the number 1 quarterback. I mean, he really showed some great flashes. He was so dominant at the end of that UCLA game by himself. I mean, he had a couple pass breakups, finished the game, walked around with the game ball. So for me, DJ James, I think that was the most surprising, and that really hurt to see him leave. Jalen Davies, we didn't see too much of. He got some good time in the Alamo Bowl, but another high recruit guy. He didn't get a big chance just yet, but that doesn't mean that he couldn't have provided for the Ducks.
James looked like he was primed to be the number 1 corner for Oregon. And I think bringing in a guy like Christian Gonzalez, who we'll talk about here, kind of helps that veteran presence. Even if DJ James stayed, I think you still don't have quite as much experience as you would have hoped. But Davies was really a surprising move, Graham, because you look at his profile being a high-level recruit, an All-American coming out of modern-day Southern California area, an area that the Ducks have been really, really successful in from the recruiting side of things. Demetrius Martin is a Southern California guy himself, so he would be able to play for a Southern California coach here in Eugene. He had a great opportunity to really seize the reps that were there for him. So I don't know. I didn't have any intel on that decision specifically, but it definitely felt like a little bit of a head scratcher for me once we saw it. And then Mikhail Wright, he had some pretty decent production in his most recent season. I think back to the pick he had against Arizona. That was definitely one of the biggest highlights for me. It was surprising to see how his special teams value, I really feel like, kind of declined as he was here at Oregon. He had those 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns his freshman season in 19. And then we never really saw the special teams coming together, and that shouldn't be viewed entirely as a slight, to him. I think that the special teams at Oregon, particularly the return units, have been pretty lackluster these past couple of years, and we haven't seen much excitement there either. So we've talked about some of these guys that are going to be moving on. Unless you had anything to add there, Graham, how about we start digging into some of the guys that are on the roster and are going to be making a difference here for the Ducks in spring?
Yeah, that sounds good. Enough of the negative. Let's get to what's looking good for the Ducks.
All right, so let's start off with Christian Gonzalez. What do you think about him?
Oh, I mean, huge pickup. Definitely, you got to directly credit it to Demetrius Martin. Followed him from Colorado. He saw a lot of action in his freshman year. It was that COVID-shortened year, but as a freshman cornerback starting for Colorado Buffaloes, he was picked on a lot. And I think even at the end of just that 6-game season for Colorado, he showed massive improvement. I think that Alamo Bowl in 2020, he was great, or that would be 2021 at the end of 2020 season. He had 5 pass breakups, or he had 5 tackles, 2 pass breakups. There was one where he was neck and neck with the Texas wide receiver the whole time, got physical with him, flew through the air to get a swat. I mean, he really has everything that you're looking for in a cornerback, I think.
You see some of the continuity there with him coming over from Colorado with Martin. So I think that's an additional reason why Duck fans should be optimistic for him to contribute at a high level his first season in Eugene. And you also think about how he was a safety coming out of high school, but he obviously has that versatility to move over to corner, which is something another one of the guys that we're going to talk about did in Triquez Bridges. But as far as Gonzalez goes, he's one of the taller corners on this roster. which I think is pretty interesting because that's a trend that we've seen, I think, really all throughout college football, but even more so here at Oregon, not only with the guys that are coming to Oregon, but the guys that they're offering. Length is becoming a premium. Dan Lanning said as much in some of his press conferences, talking about how you want length, size, speed, really across the board at any position, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And with some of the high flying skill players that we're going to be seeing here with Lincoln Riley taking over at USC. And I think that Pac-12 recruiting is getting a little bit better, certainly lacking compared to a lot of other schools. But you think about Oregon maybe having to play Arizona this year, potentially, with Tyrone McMillan, who was a former Oregon commit. Having guys that are this big to line up with some of the lengthier options is going to be pretty beneficial, I think, when you look at how the defense is kind of shaking out. And Gonzalez, even though we haven't seen him play at Oregon, he feels like one of the surer options that's on the roster right now.
100%. I think that at 6'2", you know what? In modern day football, with big guys going up for jump balls, you got to be just as tall on the defense. But you got to be able to move with them too. Wide receivers are getting taller and faster, which means the defense just has to react the same. And you were talking about some of the really good guys, the really good wide receivers that we see coming out of the Pac-12. I know one date that certainly is circled for Gonzalez and Martin will be USC. Brendan Rice, he transferred there and he torched the Ducks for over 100 yards last season. So I think that'll be definitely, that's one of the big names to watch. Jerry Rice's son, for crying out loud. And so I think Gonzalez definitely sizes up well, and him and Martin will be out looking for some really strong showings. Them as the, that's a perfect 1-2 to come into Eugene with, and I think they'll be great together.
Yeah, super random tangent real quick. I just figured this might look weird, so I wanted to clear it up. I'm drinking one of these sparkly waters, Spindrift. It's a raspberry lime, so I'm not drinking on the podcast. Have you ever had one of these? Are you a sparkling water kind of guy?
I've definitely seen them around. I've seen them around. What's the hype about?
I mean, it's pretty good. I was drinking one when I was visiting some family the other day, out in Southern California. And then I saw these at the store. I was like, oh, I'm gonna grab one of those. So just wanted to clear that up. But yeah, I think when we talked about the transfers that USC saw, Brendan Rice was one of the better options in the Pac-12 and in its entirety. He had one of his better games against Oregon when Colorado came out to Eugene in October. Oregon just trounced them, but Rice was probably the only bright spot of that whole game for the Buffs. And speaking about USC, Travis Dye goes over there. So all the transfer portal news has been really wild. Heck, we saw Jaden Daniels go to LSU just yesterday. I thought that was pretty wild to see because he was a high profile recruit. Oregon was definitely interested in him to kind of bring it back to an Oregon angle, but for him to go as late as he did with spring ball, I don't know if spring ball has started in Baton Rouge just yet, but I think that he's expected to be there pretty soon here. It's just crazy to see how college football has shifted in that regard, because the transfer portal is obviously another branch of recruiting, and that's something that we're covering pretty extensively here at Ducks Digest. So what did you think about that move with Daniels going to LSU, Brian Kelly's first year, just to kind of take it to a national look?
Definitely. I think the transfer portal, you know what? It helps you make a lot of friends. All right. We see a lot of high touted recruits. Maybe they didn't find it working out in their first try at university. And we've seen great success stories from the transfer portal. Probably first in my mind, Joe Burrow heading to LSU, transferring away from Ohio State and became probably one of the best quarterbacks of all time in college. But also you make a lot of enemies. I saw some very upset Arizona State players, when Jaden Daniels left. You mentioned it was very late, they were cleaning out his locker for him. He seems like he hopped on a plane and wasn't looking back. But so a lot of teams, they'll be out looking for revenge, I think. So it may not always work out so well, but definitely just a whole nother branch of recruiting. And it's like the battle isn't even over once someone recruits and plays a season there. The recruiting battle never dies, basically.
With the transfer portal era of college football, coaches now have to recruit players that are currently on their roster even after they get them to their school. So it's another dynamic that is changing things quite a bit in today's era of college football. We talked about Christian Gonzalez and why we kind of feel like he's a guy that we're excited about. He's one of a number of transfers that the Ducks have added, all of which are on defense except for Bo Nix, I think. Oh no, you have Chase Cota too. So Chase Cota as well.
That's right.
But we're seeing obviously a pretty big focus on defense. And another guy that we want to talk about, I think we can use this comment from Andrew here. If you guys are watching on YouTube, definitely hop into the live chat, throw any questions our way. If you want to talk about the cornerback depth, which is the focus of this episode, or if you have any other Oregon football questions, we're here for all of it. So definitely throw some questions at us. Andrew says Florence and Tucker should be a shutdown tandem for years. All the extra time together in high school should make their communication next level. So as of right now, I don't believe Tucker's going to be here for spring football, at least from what I've seen. I think it's been reported that Florence is going to be here for at least part of spring ball. That's a good point, though. I think playing together at the high school level at Lincoln is definitely going to make it easier for them to be on the same page. I think if I'm Oregon, I've kind of, the way I'm thinking about this is you hope that Christian Gonzalez can be that number one lockdown guy for you. And then that Trikweze Bridges and Dante Manning are ready to step into larger roles. And maybe one of the Jaleels can play pretty good football and a large amount of snaps as a freshman, because Graham, both Jaleel Florence and Jaleel Tucker were super highly rated recruits, right? That's awesome. You want to get those kind of guys on your roster, but let's be honest, cornerback is one of the hardest positions to contribute at an early stage. Even Mikhail Wright, who is one of the better corners to come through Oregon in recent years, he wasn't even for sure starter when he was a freshman in 2019. He was definitely a heavy rotational guy, but Oregon's kind of in the position where they might have to have some of these younger guys play some serious snaps as freshmen.
Yeah, and right there, I think you said it right there. First of all, they're going to need to rely on some of these younger guys, but that also gives those younger guys an opportunity to shine like maybe Mikhail could not early in his career. So I think Jaleel Florence and Jaleel Tucker, either of them coming in, it's even money on who's going to be better first. I mean, both of them are lightning fast. Jaleel Florence ran a 10.77 100 meter, and Jaleel Tucker was just over 11 seconds. So, I mean, both of them insanely fast, which obviously you love to see that, got to bring that electricity, that fire, that passion back to Oregon football, like I think we used to see back in the days. But it's really tough to say. I think Florence, he also played basketball. He started playing basketball before he played football, which is crazy to me. But you can see it in his ball skills. I mean, he is going for it like every play. Ball hawk. You better not let him hit your quarterback unblocked, because he might just be out of the game. So I think, my money might be on Florence to come in and make that impact. He started a little bit later, but he has just boomed exponentially since really coming on at San Diego. At Lincoln High School. And to this comment's point, how could you not love that chemistry that they bring in? That's just obviously a positive, and I think it'll definitely work out for the Ducks.
With Florence being a late bloomer, it speaks to the kind of athlete that he is, and not only that, Graham, but his football IQ and how well he's grasped the game. I think that's something that maybe we don't talk about enough, because one of the biggest wake-up calls for a lot of these guys, I think, when they come from high school and they were the guy, you got to process the game at a totally different speed and a totally different level. So some guys who might have been able to win with just pure talent and raw athleticism at the high school level maybe find a little bit of a harder time at college. I'm not saying that that's the case with these guys, but just something to be kind of aware of. And I think that I'm super excited about both their playmaking abilities. If you flip on their highlights, Tucker has a lot of really good clips from his time at wide receiver. I know that was something he was thinking about when he was a recruit, was trying to play both ways or play wide receiver, but the Ducks were able to get him. And then Florence is super polished. I like to see how I like the fire that he plays with. And both of those guys take a ton of pride in being from San Diego, which is another talent hotbed that has been super kind to Oregon. So look for them to stay present down there for sure for years to come. Lincoln, I know for the 2023 class, they have Roderick Robinson, and I think he's going to be one of the top running backs in the country by the time all things are said and done. He's a guy that the Ducks definitely need to get back out to campus pretty soon here. And as we roll along talking about some of the options on Oregon's roster, our next guy that we want to hit on, Graham, is Trikweze Bridges. We alluded to him a little bit earlier in this episode of the podcast, a former safety that has converted to cornerback, kind of along the lines of Christian Gonzalez. Definitely another taller, lengthier guy on the roster, and hoping that he can take a pretty big step here, seeing that the Ducks really need some help at corner.
Yeah, he switched over, to cornerback during last offseason. He was in a battle for that, kind of that top rotation role in the cornerback room with him and Dante Manning. And by the end of the year, he definitely won that battle. So, over a season, he's gotten a lot more reps in at cornerback. And at 6'3", I mean, you can tell that he was a safety first. He definitely still has that power that you would want coming through. So he'll be great on the run defense, which Oregon is usually better at. Yeah, I mean, just looking at some of his tape from high school and some of his records, I mean, it's actually crazy that he holds the Alabama high school state records for most interceptions and pick sixes across a career. I mean, you're talking about guys like Dre Kirkpatrick, Marlon Humphrey, Captain Munnerlin. I mean, these guys are great NFL players, and none of them had as good of a high school career as Bridges. So you got to be excited for that.
His tapes really popped when I was watching him coming out of high school. And if you're Oregon, you're hoping that a guy like him can really be a playmaker for you, seeing that they're trying to get back into the state of Alabama. Just in the last week or so, I've interviewed a pair of guys from Alabama that recently picked up Oregon offers. So that would be huge for them to get back into that talent hotbed, with TJ Dudley being a guy that was committed in the 2022 cycle. And then he ended up at Clemson after the coaching turnover. But as for Bridges, we saw a little bit of the flash of kind of what he has to offer. I think about his fourth down stop against Fresno State last year. I think that was probably one of the biggest plays that comes to mind. But if I'm the Oregon staff and I'm coming in and evaluating this current group of corners, how comfortable is Trikweze Bridges after having a full season at cornerback? What kind of skills does he still need to tweak? When you look at a bigger guy, you obviously, I think you latch on to being physical at the line of scrimmage. That's something that you would hope would kind of come naturally. But how fluid are his hips? How does he move and, read the play and adjust to the ball in the air? Because that's, when we're talking about safeties, I think that's one of the skills that really comes in handy is the ball skills that they have. And he obviously has a lot of it with his interceptions record that you referenced from his days at Lynette as a prep. So I think the talent is there. We're just looking to see a little bit more refined technique. Hopefully he's playing with a lot more confidence. That was something that he kind of had said. That was the tone of a lot of his interviews when the media were asking him about that. I was definitely one of those guys who kind of just, when we were talking to him, that was like, okay, hey, you moved to corner. How you doing? You moved to corner. How you doing? And hopefully we'll be able to kind of just see that growth a little bit more. And then just see him be a pretty big force in this defense.
Yeah, definitely. I think, there's a lot that you can say for having a full season to go, in 2020, that shortened season, there wasn't as much time to get the work in. And I think, now that he's had a full season of playing games at cornerback, I think, and another off season, coming up where he can work with this new coach, Demetrius Martin, Christian Gonzalez, one of the better cornerbacks that have come through, and I think that an offseason of work will have him ready to be solid in that CB2 spot.
One of the things that kind of came to my mind just now, Graham, we were talking about how there's some continuity for Christian Gonzalez with him playing under Demetrius Martin. But if you flip the other side of the coin for the rest of the roster, these corners don't have continuity. They're not working with Rod Chance. They're not working with Tim DeRuyter. And you have to deal with the challenges that come with learning new terminology, learning new scheme. We're still waiting to see what kind of scheme Dan Lanning wants to deploy here. One of Andrew's questions here in the comments was asking about what kind of secondary Lanning usually wants to run. So that'll be something we're hopefully going to be able to find out as we look into spring football here. Not quite sure what our media access is going to be, but Graham, how do you think that'll kind of factor in with these young guys that are still getting settled into the college level, having another new coach?
You know what? I think these young guys will definitely take it as an opportunity. Like we talked about a little bit earlier, highly touted recruits, they come in thinking they're the man, they think, or they came from a place where they were the best on their team, maybe the best in their city, So I think a lot of these guys might even be excited to have a new coach get a chance to reestablish themselves. And I mean, the pecking order, it's brand new. We assume Christian Gonzalez will slide into that first spot, and we can make predictions at what it's going to be. But if someone has a great spring, what's stopping them from shooting up that ladder, that depth chart? I don't think anything is.
You mentioned the pecking order. It is completely wide open here with the current situation that the Ducks have for themselves. And I think someone who may be looking to reestablish themselves is Dante Manning. He's someone who came to Oregon as the 12th highest ranked recruit in the program's history, rated a 5-star according to 247 Sports. That's where we're getting those numbers from. But last year, for much of fall camp, it was really Manning and Bridges kind of neck and neck in that cornerback 2 battle, just trying to get a little bit bigger piece of the puzzle. And honestly, it came down to Bridges was the guy that we saw more of ultimately. And then I think Manning was a little bit dinged up kind of on and off throughout the season. So him coming over during the pandemic, dealing with the injuries and everything, that's obviously not ideal. Not to say he's using that as an excuse, but that's just the reality of the situation. But he's a guy that I feel like I'm the most confident from the current roster that was here last year that can take that bigger step forward, seeing that he is a little bit more of the traditional size at cornerback. I think he's around 5'11", has crazy track speed. I think I was reading your story and you said that he played a little bit of linebacker in high school. So, he's a guy who's not afraid to get his nose in there and lower the boom on someone. So with him just being a guy who I think is probably a little bit more agile than Triquez Bridges and has a lot of top end speed, he's a guy that I'm looking forward to have a big spring, seeing that he has, all of these accolades and all the hype has kind of been building for him for a while. So hopefully he can hit the ground running. Hopefully he's completely healthy. And I think he's someone who could really, really capitalize off of a strong spring for the Ducks.
Yeah, I totally agree. I, for one, was kind of expecting Manning to maybe win that battle against Bridges last year and take that step last year. And we didn't see it, for whatever reason, he had some injuries to deal with. But I think now Manning finds himself in a really nice position to fill a need that Oregon's going to have. We were talking about Gonzalez, Bridges, they're 6'2" and up. At 5'11", Manning will be the guy that the Ducks can look to be on a smaller receiver, a quicker receiver. You talked about that track speed, I think that'll be a huge necessity for the Ducks this year with the taller guys that they got at cornerback. Jaleel Florence, he's going to be 6'1.5", almost 6'2". That's still pretty tall. Even though he's got the speed, you want someone a little bit smaller, a little bit lower to the ground. And I think that he will definitely get some good work for the Ducks this year.
Just taking the secondary into account as a whole, Graham, this might be the tallest and fastest secondary we've seen at Oregon in quite some time. Dan Lanning said it himself. They signed, I believe, 9 players with track backgrounds as well. So if you're looking at the secondary and taking that into account, you got to have speed if you want to make an impact. And speed travels wherever you're playing, regardless if you're at Autzen or on the road and somewhere else. If you're in Atlanta playing against the Georgia Bulldogs who like to load up at wide receiver, that's something that's going to be huge for the Ducks to make sure that they're staying in contention with some of their biggest matchups in 2022. Have a couple more guys to talk about here, Graham. I think we've hit on some of the main players that we think are going to be in contention for the Ducks starting at cornerback. And some of the other guys we want to talk about that we didn't get to see a ton of last year, Avonte Dickerson. He was, I believe, an All-American coming out of high school, out of Omaha in the 2021 recruiting class, as well as Darren Barkins, another Southern California guy. He was really slight of frame. I think he's someone that needs to put on some more weight before he's really ready for a pretty big sample size, but he was really lauded for his speed again when he was a recruit. And as far as Dickerson goes, he was the one we saw a little bit more of compared to Barkins last year, but he was pretty lauded for his play on special teams. When we did see him, I thought he was someone that Cristobal was pretty excited about throughout the season. So we were talking about Davies having a chance to get a bigger role this year. Well, now that he's gone, or he's in the transfer portal, I should say, that still hasn't been officially confirmed if he's going to be moving on. Dickerson and Barkins look like guys that are in prime position to capitalize.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. I think Dickerson, he was one of the guys that was actually a true freshman last year with all the red shirts and the COVID season free eligibility. It's hard to keep track of all the freshmen, but he was a true freshman last year, so he didn't get too much time. But coming out as the number 8 cornerback in his class, I mean, that's definitely eye-popping right there. And this guy on his tape, he is lightning quick. I think we talked about, Mikhail Wright. He would take some kicks back. Definitely the Ducks lost Micah Pittman, who would take some kicks back. I think he has a chance to return some kicks, some punts for the Ducks, and he might just be the fastest person in the secondary. He is seriously quick. I mean, it's definitely something that the Ducks always prioritize, but yeah, this guy has got the speed that kills.
And looking at the Jaleels, I think there are 2 other guys that could maybe find an additional role in the return game. So you have Chris Hudson and Seven McGee back. Those are some guys that had some experience last year as far as the return game goes. One other kind of interesting comparison, Graham, that I was thinking about, when you're looking at the corners, they're going to get better by doing what? Going against the wide receivers that Oregon has, which has continued to evolve and really just setting the bar higher. Brian McClendon before he went to Miami, and then, had a cup of coffee there and ended up at Georgia. That was hilarious, by the way, because, you figured that he was going to be leaving Oregon just with the tone of the press conferences when I was there. But the fact that he was really not at Miami for very long, I'm sure some Oregon fans are happy about that are maybe sour about Cristobal's departure. But I bring all that up to say Oregon's corners, young. Oregon's wide receivers, also very young. But tell me if you don't agree with this, what I think about Oregon's wide receivers, I'm a little bit more encouraged at the youth there rather than on the defensive side of the ball, with the youth that they have there. I think having youth at receiver is probably better than having youth at the cornerback spot.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I mean, a wide receiver, I think they will get more chances to make that big play, where as a cornerback, if they get little reps, they'll only stick out if they get burnt or make an interception. Which one's more likely for a freshman cornerback? Probably getting burnt. So, I think that at the wide receivers, I think they're gonna take some big steps this spring as well. So definitely, cornerback with you need a lot more cornerbacks on the field with that rotation that you got to have going. So there's a lot less reps going on. Whereas a young wide receiver, they can really excel much quicker, I think.
Ducks brought in Christian Gonzalez from the transfer portal this offseason, and they could be making another move in the transfer portal pretty soon here. UCLA transfer linebacker Mitchell Agude, hopefully I'm saying that right, he's going to be in town for a visit this weekend. Has the Ducks in his top 4 along with Washington, Miami, and Tennessee. So we talked about the portal a lot this episode. He's another guy that you guys want to keep an eye on. Hopefully I can get some intel on where Oregon stands with him. He's kind of an edge kind of guy, edge, outside linebacker type of deal. So he has a lot of upside in the run defense as well. So he's someone to keep an eye on for sure. Graham, I think we're going to wrap this one up. I feel like we've hit on a lot of the biggest names to watch for the Ducks here as we head into spring ball. Spring ball starting in just 3 days for the Ducks here. So we're kind of full steam ahead on wrapping up our preview content. Is there anything else that you wanted to add just about the corners, about Oregon football? Just kind of wanted to give you the floor if there was anything else on your mind.
Definitely. Just since you just brought it up, I think our guy Dylan in the Ducks Digest team loves Mitchell Agude. I think he would be just head over heels if he were to come to the Ducks and join Chase Cota, who I forgot to mention. I think he will be a great piece for the Ducks this year, bringing some veteran leadership to a really young wide receiver group that we were talking about. But most importantly, I just would like to finish on that this team or this cornerback group has so many opportunities this spring, and they'll get opportunities straight off the bat. Against Georgia, they always got high-level recruits, definitely at wide receiver at every position. They're going to get their chances. And I think by the end of the season, we'll see at least 1 or 2 guys from this room really, really take that big step.
Some of these young Oregon cornerbacks are looking to prove themselves as the Ducks kick off spring football this week. Graham, before we get out of here, you're doing stuff with Duck TV Sports. You primarily do written stuff for us. That's why I was so excited to bring you on the YouTube channel, on the podcast. Where can people find more of you if they want to lock in with you?
Yes, sir. Definitely follow me at Graham Metzker on Twitter. I'm posting all my Duck TV videos, my Ducks Digest articles. That all of my stuff is going on there. So definitely find me there. And just a pleasure to be on the show. I'm glad we got it together.
Absolutely, man. Well, if you guys want to find more of me, you can follow me on Twitter at that name on your screen right there, at mtorresports. If you guys want to find more of our Oregon Ducks coverage, definitely head on over to ducksdigest.com. You can also follow the Ducks Dish podcast on Twitter at Ducks Dish. And then kindly ask that you subscribe to my YouTube channel at Oregon Football Max Torres. Really appreciate the support there. You can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. Do us a favor and give us a 5-star review. Really tremendous help for us over there. But really enjoy doing these podcasts with Graham. This one's live right now on YouTube. And then after this, we will actually be back on YouTube later tonight, looking at about 7 o'clock Pacific, where I will be talking about the offensive line with Ali Osborne. So appreciate you guys for tuning in. Thank you so much to Graham for coming on here, and we will catch you guys in the next episode. Take care.